Vivek, hi, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks, Ashu. Nice to connect with you.
We're meeting after a long time. We met last time around, which was physical, but it's good to be reconnected virtually, right? I hope things have been okay at your end. Everybody's safe.
Yeah, things are going good.
Wonderful. Vivek, before we dive into our topic today, right? Which is building scalable tech, right? And who better than you to sort of address this topic? Who has a very large feet on street across the country and outside, right?
Mhm.
To be managing, the efficiency of the workforce through technology. But before we dive into that, Vivek, what I would love to hear is, you've had an exciting career, right? If you could share us and take us through that journey, it'll be lovely to start.
Sure. So, Ashu, it's almost like 20 years since I graduated from college.
Right.
It was 2001, exactly 20 years now. So, I worked with various corporates. Like I started my career with Intel, and then I worked with companies like Nokia and Accenture before starting my own venture in real estate, which got later merged with Square Yards.
Right.
So at Square Yards, we are a 6-year-old startup now, started around late 2014.
Right.
And in the last 6 years, we have become the largest Proptech platform in India by far.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we're doing we just closed last year at around 50 million USD of revenue, close to $1 billion of GTV. And we have 5,000 employees now present in 9 countries. So going good.
That is amazing, right? And I think I've had the opportunity of discussing, a lot of these details with you at a personal level, right? And I think the growth that Square Yards has had has been absolutely impeccable.
Yeah, so we always say that we are a outlier in a negative industry. Okay, so real estate has been going down since we started. In fact, early 2011-12 were boom times of real estate, and then from 2014 it started going down, and that's where we were born.
Right.
So we haven't seen the good days of industry, but we have seen good growth for the company. So we have been outperforming the industry by almost 50% every year.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I would love to, at a different occasion, I would love to capture some of those details, right, between you and Tanush. Vivek, 2020 has been a very unreal year, right? I think for a lot of industries, for the way consumer behave, it is just disrupted how we consumed, right? Anything and everything which was designed for last 100 years got disrupted, right?
Mhm.
Who would have thought that a large part of the workforce is going to be based out of offices and sorry, it's going to be based out of homes, and work from home is going to become the new sort of a trend, right? And of course there is a school of thought which says that this is a temporary thing, and then there is a school of thought which says that this is something which is going to go on for a much longer time. What are some of your thoughts, right, about what you see in the market?
Yes. So if I see the market overall, there are like primarily two segments, residential and commercial.
Right.
So we are seeing a low activity in commercial already
Okay.
because people are not renewing their leases.
Right.
They are having flexibility and all. But if I look at residential sector where we operate majorly,
Right.
we have been seeing consistently seeing a uptick in demand.
Hmm.
Even during the last year when the lockdown started,
Right.
last year Q1 was one of our exemplary growth quarters where we did fantastic numbers despite industry going down. And I see the primary reason, and after the lockdown was over, our revenue grew like anything.
Right.
And if I look at some of the reasons, is that people after staying at home, they have realized the importance of home, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So people who are staying in 2 BHKs, they want 3 BHKs. People who are staying in rental house, they want something of their own.
Right.
People who are even people who are staying in rental homes, they are looking to switch the homes. Sorry.
Hmm.
So people want bigger spaces with a private office or some where they can work safely. So we are seeing a lot of activity in residential space.
Okay.
Um, the demand has generally improved.
Hmm.
Uh, I think it's going, and real estate for the last 1 years or so, because of some government interventions like stamp duty reductions and all, it has been on slight upswing. So we see a lot of pent up demand already after
Right.
this recent lockdown. So we'll hope to see good demand in residential.
Very interesting. And Vivek, is this trend, a tier or a metro trend or a tier one or a tier two trend, or is this something which you're seeing across the country?
Not exactly. So we see real estate for the past 10 years has been a majorly metro trend, and within the metro also it's main the CBDs or the central business districts which are
Right.
close to the office spaces and all. But
Right.
after this lockdown, we have seen a lot of demand in the suburbs as well as in tier two, because
Okay.
people have moved back
Right.
and they want a similar lifestyle over there. uh, at their native place. People are moving to suburbs because they don't have to travel to offices,
Right.
right? So the suburb demands, like maybe you can say a Greater Noida or a Thane. Uh,
Right.
these are increasing.
Okay. And how about tier two, right? What is it that you're seeing in tier
Tier
two? Which are the
two,
cities that are bringing in the most volume?
yeah. So we are not present in tier two as of now.
Okay.
We operate out of major metros, but uh, on our websites we are getting a lot of queries for tier two. So we see some activity there.
Okay. Interesting. And I mean, I know you highlighted, right? But do you think this is a trend which is here to stay, or the market should readjust? Once we are through with this phase of pandemic.
I think it's here to stay. So if we see over a longer time macroeconomic cycle also,
Right.
real estate as a sector has been on a downward trend since last 7-8 years, right?
Right.
So typically you see those 8 to 10 year cycles.
Mhm.
So before the COVID stuck, it was on the upswing, and after the lockdown were uh, uh, after the lockdown was eased,
Right.
the demand picked up.
Right.
So we see this not as a shorter term trend, but a slightly longer term trend. Probably the upcoming cycle should last at least next 4 5 years.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Vivek, before we start to discuss the tech, right, which is essentially, what are the agenda of our discussion today is. Give us a sense of, how are you structured as an organization, right? You mentioned that about 5,000 people, right? Give us a sense of the structure of the organization, please.
Yeah. So see, we started with the primary real estate, which is the new
Right.
home sales. So majority of our people and the offices are still doing it. That's our bread and butter. So out of 5,000, probably 4,000 odd are sales people, right? So it's a large feet on street that we have. So primary real estate, then we ventured into mortgages almost 4 years back, and then now we are the second largest mortgage player in India in terms of distribution strength and the amount of loan disbursed. Then last year we started some new verticals, like we ventured into rentals, property
Right.
management,
Right.
enterprise SaaS, data intelligence. A lot of new companies also we acquired. So now, if you look at the overall structure, so we have almost 5,000, out of which around 4,000 are pure feet on street sales guys,
Okay.
and rest 1,000 are actually spread across tech, marketing, operations, finance, support function. We have a small call center listing team, so rest 1,000 are spread across those.
Wow, that's a large team. And Vivek, across how much time? How has the team grown, right? I think this bump up in the number has happened in the last 2 years, 3 years, or
No, we have been
what's been
consistently growing. So, like when we merged with Square Yards, we were like 300 people, 400
right?
people.
Okay,
Now,
okay,
so we have grown 10 times in last 6 years, and most of this growth has you're right. Most of this growth has happened in the last 2 years.
hmm
So I think in 2019 we were around 2,000 people. Now we are almost 5,000. So almost 2.5x growth there.
Very interesting. Vivek, our discussions, we've of course discussed this, right? The tech has been at the forefront of Square Yards, right? One of the largest, one of the larger reasons of Square Yards being able to sort of expand so fast, achieve the kind of height that it did, was largely because the structures were designed in a way which were extremely transparent, right? And something that brought in a lot of I think visibility in terms of what was happening, and I think could capture the entire product or the consumer's journey, right? And real estate is a piece where it's a very very immersive process, right? It's a very elaborate piece of tech that you built, right? So why don't you share a little more about the primary tech stack that you built at Square?
Okay, so I'll say our tech is actually a four-part tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at any consumer or any people who are looking for real estate,
Right.
so most of the time they will go online and search for localities where properties are. They will look at listings and all.
Right.
So that's a search and discovery piece.
Okay.
So which is our portal squareyards.com. Now it attracts almost traffic of around 4 million a month. We are still not in the top tier there. There are companies like Magic Bricks and 99 Acres, which have been there much earlier than us.
Right.
So their traffic still tops, but we are getting there. Hopefully, in a couple of years, we will be in one of the top tiers in terms of search and discovery piece.
Okay.
It's the online search. So that's just one piece of the overall consumer journey. So once people look at a few property, they shortlist, they want to visit those properties, right? They want to see it's real estate is still a touch and feel kind of thing, right? So for that, they would want to either contact an agent or one of our in-house experts. So we have a whole tech built around this, right? So how do people get leads? How do they work on it? How do they schedule site visits? How do they interact with consumers? So every site visit gets recorded in the system. The feedback is taken from the customer, right? What did he like? What did he not like? Whether he wants to visit more properties. So this whole, I would say, field force tech,
Right.
which is also integrated with the consumer journey.
Right.
So both the agent and the consumer, they are, so the search is happening offline, but the experience of that search or the ground research that the consumer is doing is recorded online, right? So that's the second part, right?
Okay.
Which is, let's say, first is the online search, second is the ground research, right? Because real estate is a thing that people would buy in a lifetime, probably once or twice. So generally people would do site visits. Even for rentals, they would like to see the house, right?
Right.
So that's the second part of the tech around the field force management and how do we actually give a good consumer experience without losing him in the offline journey, right?
Right.
The third part is once he has decided to buy or rent something, then can we actually enable his transaction? So can we give him a online inventory tool where he can select his unit, he can fill his form digitally, he can pay a token amount online, he can e-sign the contracts, right?
Right.
He can generate agreements. So that's around the transaction piece. That's the third part of the tech that we have built. And coupled with this tech is also the mortgage journey. So around 70% of the customers also go for a home loan, right? So for these guys, we have built a digital mortgage journey where they apply the loan online, they get their credit scores immediately, they get their KYCs and everything verified. And then we have tied up with the banks on the other side where we actually are able to generate a sanction letter immediately.
Right.
So a transaction plus mortgage is the third piece of the tech, right? And the fourth piece, which is the post purchase, right? Once you have bought a property and many of these are under construction houses, the possession has still not been done, right? So around, or if the possession is done, people want to put some of these guys would want to put these properties on rent. or get them managed professionally. So this whole piece around rental, property management, getting the house furnished, getting the house inspected if there are any service request or repair, right? So this whole piece we have recently built,
Okay.
which is around the post purchase services.
Right.
We also acquired a company called as PropCMC, which is doing very interesting work in terms of asset management.
Right.
So a lot of our customers are investors who have multiple assets, right? So they can manage their whole asset into one platform, just like a wealth management platform. You manage your mutual funds and stocks and all those investment. So the same way, we have built a platform to manage your real estate assets.
Okay.
So you can check property taxes, the ledger, what is the capital gain, right? So this whole piece around post-purchase services is the fourth piece of tech.
Okay.
So this completes the consumer journey, and then we have some B2B tech also for agents. There is an app called as Square Connect, which has like around 150,000 brokers on the platform.
Wow.
We built a SaaS platform for real estate developers, where they can use some of our tech to improve their operational efficiencies. So there's a CRM, there's a digital inventory, there's a e-sign, there's a booking process, channel partner management. So whole lot of tech we are building on the B2B side also.
Very interesting.
That's the entire tech.
Vivek, that's a very complicated piece, right? And I think what I realize is, and when I hear you, right, there is this latest development which has happened, right? You know, my question is, what goes into creating, or what are the do's and don'ts when you're creating a scalable tech, right? What are some of those key elements that you have to factor in, right? So one is, of course, you have to understand the stakeholders, right, in terms of who's going to behave, how customer clearly is the number one priority, right? So you really sort of map it out in that sense. But when you're creating an ecosystem like the one you are, right, how is it that you ensure that, at a design level, how do you ensure that it's done optimally? That's number one. Second, how do you ensure that it's integrated, right? Because in a lot of occasions and a lot of organizations, who have multiple, offerings, what tends to happen is that, pieces of, or the pieces that they build, right, for a particular activity, then it only operate in a certain silo, right? They do not interact between each other, right? How do you sort of, one, design for scale? Second, how do you ensure that all of what you build is interacting with each other? There's intelligence which is available, right? How do you do some of that?
Yeah, so I'll come to the first part of the question, which is how do you design a scalable tech? So whenever we design a product, and we have close to, I think on last count, we have close to 22 odd products within our portfolio, right?
Okay.
So when we sit on a drawing table, we always start with a consumer journey, and the building the personas, and then identifying who is our actual target consumer, right? So there'll be like 10 personas built, but are you focusing on the one which is going to be the most utilizing guy on that tech, right? So for example, I'll give you some example. We built something, and for consumers, there was a rental agreement kind of thing which we built for consumer, but it was not no consumer was using it, and we found that the agents were the one who were using it very aggressively. So we redesigned that tech for an agent persona.
Okay.
Starting with the persona, and then see, for building a scalable tech, I see a lot of companies, and I've seen a lot of product managers. They focus on perfection, right? They would want to build all features. They would want to have first release, which will have a almost perfect product, and that's why the timelines get extended.
Right.
So we as a company have always believed that, you don't aim for perfection in the first go, right? Because perfection is something which the market will teach you, right? What it wants. So a lot of our products, we launch a product with full fanfare, and we see that there's no user, right? Users haven't come. So, and we spent like 6 months developing that product. So now what we do is we actually iterate very fast, right?
Right.
We have a very uh, functional product, may not be the perfect product, right? May not be a very like next level UI and all, but we just
Right.
launch it,
Right.
and then we analyze the users who are coming to it. So we have different analytics tools through which we actually we see video recordings like what the users are doing,
Okay.
and then we actually bring on the features.
Okay.
So one of the things for building scalable, one of the important things for building a scalable tech is decide what not to build, right?
Okay.
Because when you sit on drawing table, the product
Right.
managers will come up with like 100 features and then you're bogged down, right?
Right.
So it is always important to focus on the core thing, right? Get it right and then build the ancillary things around it.
Right. Right.
And then second is, as you said, coming to the second part, like how do we actually integrate this
Right.
across the ecosystem, right? We have
Right.
22 products and some of these are still silos. I'll say that we are still not perfect, but a couple of years before we thought that we are actually going to build a layer which we call it as a microservice layer, right?
Okay.
Which would feed all our platforms. Okay, so we
Okay.
have a new home platform, we have a secondary platform, we have a rental, we have a mortgage, we have post sales, right?
Right.
So we stopped building monolithic systems a few years ago,
Okay.
and we started building a lot of core infrastructure, core microservices which will feed to all these platforms.
Okay.
For example, there is a microservice for payments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a rental guy will also need a payment, a primary guy, a mortgage guy, all of these guys need a payment. Or let's say e-signature,
Right.
or let's say something related to getting a rating or review of an agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of these platforms would need it. So we started building these microservices which will actually feed all our tech platforms. So the backend is common,
Right.
right? But front ends can be different. It can be a mobile app, it can be a web app, it can be anything, right? But all of these actually derive data from a single source.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, I would say that the problem is still not fully solved, right?
Okay.
A lot of pieces that we have which are still not talking to each other,
Right.
a lot of data migration, ETL kind of things that we have to do, right? I would say we are getting there, but still not, still a good long way to go.
Interesting. Vivek, what I want to particularly understand is that, when you are creating for very, very large teams, right, it gets very difficult, right? And that could be possibly also because not a lot of there could be a difference in regionality, there could be a difference in ability to understand and stuff like that, right? So at a design level, how do you factor that in, right? How do you ensure that this is something which is understood by all? It's a and it's a lean piece of tech. It's not something which is cumbersome, and people can understand and eventually undertake the task that they're supposed to do, right? How do you design for that, right? How do you factor that in when you are building a certain product?
Yeah, so there are two parts of this. So one is your internal stakeholders, like
Right.
the employees or anyone who is like an admin who is using the platform, right?
Right.
And then there are external people like consumers or agents, which are outside the purview of your organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, see, while designing, we focus on the external stakeholders,
Right.
which are consumers or anyone who is like outside the company, right? Because you cannot go them and teach them,
Correct.
right? And the backend systems which are going to be used by our employees or internal admins and all those stuff, we don't focus on that, right?
Right.
Because you can still call them and say that this is how things have to be done, right?
Right.
So while designing, as I said, we start with these user personas and then take the journey and look at each of these micro steps, the interactions that the consumer is having with the platform,
Right.
right? And build on top of that. But as I think your question is like, how do you actually manage demands of various stakeholders, right? A lot of people would have different
Correct.
kind
I mean,
requirements.
how do you adjust to their understanding, right? And their requirements.
Yeah, I would say it's not a easy thing to do, right?
Right.
Especially when you are actually starting building, or you are at the drawing table. But what we generally do is we build a we take it to the stakeholders when we have some kind of mock-ups ready, right?
Right.
Because if I go to, let's say, if I'm building something for my finance team or for
Mhm.
my operations team,
Right.
right? So if you actually start involving them at the very beginning, they will have very vague ideas, right?
Correct.
And because these guys are not conditioned to be to innovate, right?
Right.
They are like the process guys, right?
Right.
So normally what we do is we create the mock-ups, wireframes and all. We put it into a nice presentation, and then we go to them, and then we discuss maybe screen by screen, workflow by workflow, and then once these guys see something
Right.
on the screen, then they are able to actually suggest better and give better inputs, right?
Right. Right.
So getting them involved is essential, but not at the very beginning. Maybe at a stage where you have some kind of product which is conceptualized. So that's how
Interesting.
you manage the internal stakeholders. External is, I would say, it's anybody's guess. You may think that your product is the best and consumers will flock to it immediately, but the market teaches you many things.
Right.
So it's a hit and trial. I mean, it's like kind of iterate, do small builds. So see, some of our products, like our consumer facing portal, it goes we have almost like 3 to 4 builds a week. So
Okay.
every second day we are shipping something,
Okay.
right? So it's that kind of fast paced environment. We have daily scrums. I run that scrum for the consumer portal personally, right?
Okay.
We decide that this is what we are going to deliver by tomorrow,
Right.
build and deliver, and then again the same drill.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Vivek, what is the product management process at Square, right? I would love to know more about. You getting the first piece out is, of course, is the most important bit, right? And what is the feedback process that you follow at Square?
Yeah. So see, one of the feedback that we get is from the analytics, right?
Right.
So we every product, everything that is going into the market, we actually integrate with a lot of analytic tools, like to measure what are the page views, what is the time spent on that, what is that the user clicked, a heat map of that page, what the
Right.
user is doing, video recording. So we do, before shipping this product, we integrate all this,
Okay.
right? And once the users start coming, we actually start measuring that. We make so we have in the product management process, we, before actually conceptualizing the product, we do something called as a OKR strategy,
Okay.
where we see, let's say, we are building a new product for rentals, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right?
Right.
So what is our objective? Our objective is to get, let's say, um, 500 rental agreements generated every month, right?
Okay.
And then probably another 200 properties acquired for property management. I'm
Right.
just giving you some examples. So
Sure.
that's our objective for next 3 months, right?
Right.
So you go backward from that objective, then what is the product that we need, right? What, for getting these kind of output numbers, what is the kind of inputs that you require, right?
Right.
So let's say getting 500 rental agreements, you would need probably 1 out of 10 people would coming onto the site would actually go and create a rental agreement, right?
Right.
So for 500, you need a traffic of around 5,000, right? For 5,000, for bringing 5,000 people onto that onto that web page, what is the kind of interventions that you need to make? What
Right.
is the kind of marketing that you need to do, right? So we build all that. I would say a rough plan. Okay. starting from objective, then key result areas, and then what are the individual action items, right? And then we come on to the product wireframe, product design, then getting those MVPs in place, launching it, iterating, right? So, and then at every week we actually go back and measure that OKR, right?
Okay.
So this was our objective. These are the 3-4 metrics that we were going to measure. What is our performance against those metrics?
Okay.
For example, let's say our goal was like having our metrics was number of people who are doing a rental agreement, and one of the results area was like reaching a conversion rate of 10%, right? So where are we with respect to that 10%? Are we at 2%, 5%, 8%? To get to that 10%, what do we need to do? Do we need to put more banners around the website to bring the people onto this page?
Okay.
Do we need to put some more content, right? So a lot of things go into this process.
Right.
And especially the products which are not B2B, which are B2C, it's much harder to crack because sometimes you need to get into a consumer psychology. Like if let's say I am the user and I am going to an unknown site, right? Or probably a known site, but with a new feature, what is that I'm going to do?
Correct. Right? Navigation becomes a challenge.
Yeah. Why would I spend time onto this? Why would I take pains to click on a button and fill some details? Right. So all of that goes. I think it's a iterative process, I would say.
It's a very interesting this thing, right? I mean, I know you're putting it out in a very simplified way, and I know for a fact it's extremely challenging, right? Given the environment that you operate in. Vivek, the other question is, how do you define that sense of ownership, right? I mean, this is not something you can deliver without a sense of ownership, right? How do you identify, or how do you cultivate champions within your team? Because product development is something which it's a never-ending play, right? The consumer is going to continue to evolve. His or her journey is going to become all the more complex. They will continue to require more and more features, right? And that has to match to the LTV and the larger strategic aspirations of the organization, right? How do you cultivate those champions, right? How do you ensure that this entire process is seamlessly integrated with strategy, with the overall larger objectives of the organization?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have been able to achieve, and somewhat successfully, is to create that sense of ownership all across the organization.
Okay.
Not only in tech and product, but we have this concept of principal partners or co-founders, right? So in Square Yards, you would find not one or two co-founders, but many co-founders, right?
Oh, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So each of us actually run this like a CEO, right? Like for example, I am the CEO of tech. Anything goes in the tech, I am responsible for my own decisions, my own budgets, my own hiring, and my own results, right? Similarly, like people, they are sales leader who are co-founders who are responsible for their function, right? So we have tried to percolate that thought process not only at the top level but across the organization. For example, in product, each of our product manager is a CEO, right? So we call him like you are the CEO of this product, right? So when we define those OKRs, right? So this is your objective. These are your key result area, and this is how we are going to measure the product, the performance.
Right.
And if you reach this level of performance, this is going to be your share out of the revenue of that product.
Okay.
So we have been doing this wealth sharing exercise since the beginning, right?
Wow. Okay.
Each of our, so we have a concept of PNLs in the sales organization, where we actually share revenue, share profit on every deal, right?
Okay.
Based on certain criteria. So, but they are also responsible for their costs.
Right.
So that brings a whole lot of accountability, ownership into the entire system, right? For example, if my product manager reaches a certain goal, right?
Right.
So he would get a share of the revenues that we are getting from that product.
Okay.
Right. So he feels that he is empowered to take decisions, right? and he is also getting the rewards.
Right.
It's not just the salary that he's getting; he's also getting a share of what the company is making onto that product.
Okay.
So that's how we have been trying to instill ownership. Then there are other things like we have a very generous ESOP policy and all, so uh, everyone actually gains from the overall growth of the company, right?
Right.
Of course, we'll be having these once we reach to a certain level of milestone, we'll probably people would make a lot of wealth within the company.
Right.
So, so that also brings certain level of ownership.
Right.
So it starts from the top and then goes down the line.
Very interesting, Vivek. And I think that gives me a certain sense of how you do it, right? And I think what is particularly more impressive is the wealth sharing aspect that you've shared, right? Because typically product managers are not really part of that entire piece, right? I think they continue to monitor basis what's happening at a product level, but I think really bringing them in a sphere where you're saying that performance is something that you have to also measure while you continue to sort of look at the journey of the consumer, improvement of the product, and so on and so forth, right? And there is a certain incentive for you which is very clearly carved out, right? Which is, and that's a very standard piece. Is that an industry standard? I mean, did you design it? Is it squared first, or is it something which has existed in the industry in a certain form?
For sales organization, many companies have tried this. So
Right.
actually, we brought this concept from a consulting model, right?
Right.
So like I was with Accenture earlier, and then I've seen a few consulting model where like they're partners who would
Right.
actually give everything for the firm, right?
Right.
And then they get a fair share of what the company is making.
Uh-huh.
So the thought process at the top is to create that kind of culture, right? So imagine that there's no one single Tanuj. They are like 30 Tanuj, 30
Right.
CEOs who are working for the company, right?
Interesting.
And then it goes a level down to the second level, third level, fourth level. Of course, it's in the current environment, it's also very difficult to find people with ownership.
Correct.
Uh, but that has been a challenge all across to get those peoples and then promote them, make them part of the journey, right? And how do you instill that culture of ownership?
Right.
It's 100%. I would agree with you that it's the ownership that defines our employee, right? The more ownership that the guy has, the more he will grow. Be in our company, be in any other company, and we always look for this trait. While hiring, I always look at ownership. Nothing. I mean, skills can be taught.
Right.
Uh, in the attitude part, I would say ownership is probably 80% of the overall thing that I would look at.
Interesting. Interesting. Vivek, I'm gonna take a, I'm gonna take a, this conversation in a slightly different direction, right? And essentially, which is more relevant for a lot of startups and early stage businesses, who are designing for a mass market, right? And I think which is what every startup is doing, right? In a certain sense. Yeah, I think, and in India, and anything you're doing, even if it's a niche, right, that translates into being a large audience play, right? What are some of the do's and don'ts of creating a scalable tech, right? If you could just share some steps, that'll be very helpful. Certain hygienes that'll be helpful, and what kind of a process should be put in place right at that foundational level, so that you know that you're designing for future, and you'll not have to waste a lot of time and resources to revisit some of those pieces that you worked on currently.
Yeah, I think it's a summary of what we discussed.
Sure.
So for creating a scalable tech, I would say that don't go for the perfect product at once, right?
Right.
Go for smaller iteration, but a functional product, right?
Okay.
Second is you should create for creating that scalable tech.
Right.
You should create that infrastructure of microservices or small services, which would actually scale up to maybe you are building for 1,000 users today,
Right.
but you don't need to plan for maybe a 100,000 users. but do you have a service in place which can scale up to that level, right?
Okay.
So because as you grow, you will have multitudes of platforms, okay, all supporting each other. So have you created that kind of data layer, that kind of services layer, and not building monolithic kind of systems, right?
Right.
So I think at a design stage, that is very important.
Right.
And as you grow, as you come to the market, you market will teach you many things. You would iterate, you would probably pivot to a different business models, right? So how do you actually keep track of how do you actually make that consumer connect, right, in terms of what consumers are liking on your website, or
Mhm.
or in your product, what they are not liking, and how often you are iterating that product to uh, to build something which they like, right?
Right.
So a lot of things I would have. I mean, it's a vast area. Building a scalable tech and building a scalable company. From a company's standpoint, I would say like bringing that kind of ownership not only at the top but at the lowest level,
Right.
right? Bringing people accountable and also make them happy when your product does good, right?
Right.
To instill that sense of ownership. So I think it's a cliche, but it's a combination of people and technology
Right.
that builds a startup or builds any company, right?
Sure.
So you have to focus on these two.
Vivek, when you're building a strong foundation, right? Team plays a very, very important role, right? And I think in now with what we've sort of experienced, I think the role of product teams and tech teams is going to become all the more important, right? And I think they're going to be they're going to have a certain sales responsibility as well, right, or revenue responsibility as well, right, in terms of how things happen, and so on and so forth, right? Uh, what do you think about choice of tech, right? Second, also, when we talk of India, right, it's a there's a massive skew in favor of, say, places like Bangalore and Hyderabad, right, where the concentration of engineering talent is far higher, right? When you look at up north, that I would say is a little lesser, right? How do you factor in those elements, right? How your decision making in that entire zone? How do you do that?
Yeah. So see, I have a slightly counterintuitive view to this. Okay.
Okay.
So uh, see, we when we started building our
Hmm.
tech was in .NET,
Right.
which is considered like a primitive technology now, right?
Right.
And then as we started growing, we started building a lot of new age technologies like Angular or React or these Node.js, right? A lot of new stuff, new kind of tech that we uh, brought to the table, right?
Right.
So, but in when I see in terms of resources, who are our most stable resources, right?
Right.
And who have been in the system long enough and take ownership and do and get stuff executed, right? It's the original guys who were not from a very advanced technology, and in terms of background also they were not from I would say private schools, like the top uh, engineering colleges and all. These were the guys who were from top tier 2 tier 3 engineering colleges. Probably the communication skills were not that good,
Okay.
right? But they had a hunger to learn, right? They had the attitude to take ownership and get things done. Maybe they would have done some things wrong at the first go, right? But they had this zeal to learn, right?
Right.
And those are the guys who have actually grown into the system,
Okay.
right? And our tech team is almost 130 people now, and I almost take like 2 to 3 interviews daily today as well.
Right.
We are hiring across crazy, and it's a talent war out there, right?
Right.
Everyone is actually vying for this talent, and I've seen these I mean, I wouldn't call myself old, but I've seen these new guys just passed out of engineering like 2 3 years back. They come into the organization, they have a very good raise that they get, and then they leave within a year or so, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The amount of time that you invest on them, I mean, it all goes for a toss.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say maybe Bangalore has talent, maybe Chennai has talent, right? But would you trust that talent to stay with you for long, right? Uh, and these are the places where the talent is very expensive also.
Right.
But if you go to maybe a tier two city, okay,
Right.
you will find very good talent over there, people
Mm-hmm.
who are willing to learn.
Right.
And you will also find that these are the guys who are not so crazy about salaries and getting like 100% hikes every year,
Okay.
right? And they are stable guys.
Right.
And these are the guys who have built our tech. And I mean, if you ask me, I always have trust in them rather than the new age guys.
Interesting. Vivek, does exposure make a difference, right? I mean, people who are working in, in savvier markets, right, automatically have, I mean, the environment and the ecosystem is very different, right? You're working on, what's the latest, right? You're kind of, and when you choose to sort of operate in an environment where you have, say, kids and, and students who come from a, say, a tier two market or tier three market, right? Do not necessarily have the same exposure, right? How do you factor that in? Because at the end of the day, it's time to market, right? And that's what everybody is fighting for. How do
Yeah.
you manage that?
Yeah, I think the exposure is is very good in the new kids, but
Right.
a lot of time what I found was that a lot of that was fluff also. Okay.
Okay.
So they get exposure, they actually know every new tech.
Hmm.
They would have learned through Wikipedia and all, but if you go one level deeper,
Right.
it's not that,
Okay.
it's not there, right? So I would say exposure makes a difference,
Right.
but it's the learning attitude and the sense of ownership, as you said,
Right.
that makes more larger difference than exposure. So see, and of course it impacts our time to market, right?
Right.
If we So there are guys who do very good stuff, right?
Hmm.
But they would be very expensive,
Right.
right? So would you actually delay your product by, let's say, a month or so,
Hmm.
right? But also make it not so expensive for the company, right?
Right.
Because if you look at since the last 3 4 years, what has been going in the talent market, especially for the tech talent, it has been crazy, right? These new startups come, they get huge fundings, and then they offer like anything to these guys,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I would say that's a short-lived thing, right?
Okay.
I would Maybe I am old school, but I would still go for a stable guy.
Right.
May not be that talented,
Right.
but he is willing to work hard.
Very interesting. Uh, Vivek, what are some of the challenges that everybody should sort of be wary of while they're building for scale, right? What are some of the some of the aspects that people should be careful about? Some
Yes.
temptations. Let me put it this way, right? Some temptations that they should be careful about. Like, for example, hiring. You said, right? Hiring expensive people is a temptation, right? I mean, I think that's the easiest that everybody goes after, right? But what are some of the other choices, right? That people should be careful about.
See, one of the temptations is going for every feature that you can
Right.
think of, right?
Okay.
So when you are designing a product, right, there'll be five things that the customer can do, right? One
Right.
of the temptation is that we will solve all the problems, solve problem A, B, C, D, everything at one
Right.
go, right?
Right.
So that's one of the temptations to resist. As I said, what not to build is more important than what to build,
Right.
right? Second temptation is, and this I've seen in more younger founders, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have an idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have an excellent idea. They have excellent product conceptualization, right? They have built an excellent product, but they think that people will just come and flock to their product, and their product will actually gain market traction on its own, right?
Right.
So one of the things that we always focus is that in the race, or let's say if you compare product versus distribution, right? It's a distribution which always wins, right? You may have a very excellent product, right? But if you're not able to get to distribute it to, let's say, a lot of users,
Right.
it will be just an excellent product, right? And we have seen umpteen examples, right? For example, Naukri may not be the best product in the hiring domain, right?
Right. That's a sweeping statement to make.
Yeah. So I'm just giving an example, right?
Sure.
But it's got a great distribution, right?
Right.
So we have always built for distribution, right? You may not have a perfect product, but if you can actually get it to hands of large number of people, your product will also improve, right? And so one of the channels that we always explore is, let's say, doing a B2C market is expensive, right? Going B2C marketing is expensive, right? But can we actually distribute a product through agents, or through some other channel, right? Or through a B2B kind of arrangement, partnership, right? So I think my advice to these younger founders would be that if you have to choose between great product and great distribution, you always choose distribution, because at least you are getting seen, right? Otherwise, you would build a good product, and that's a very good temptation to have, especially for the first time founders. They spend like months and months perfecting the product.
Right.
As soon as they enter the market and they see that there is no traffic, right? There's no one who is coming on to see the product.
Right.
Probably the same amount of time they would have spent in building the distribution, doing the partnership, going to various other platforms, right? And bringing people onto that platform.
Sure.
So I think that would be my advice.
Interesting. Vivek, what are some of the key matrices that the founders should track in the process?
I think
you've been a founder yourself, right? I think yeah.
So for us, how do we track is we have, I would say, some metrics which are core business metrics, right? Like revenue or EBITDA, like how many number of transactions that we do, right? So those are, I would say, is the output metrics, right? What is the result, right? But more importantly, what we measure internally is which we call as input metrics. Okay. For example, let's say you have a sales team, right? So the output is, let's say, number of deals, number of what is the revenue, transaction, that is the output, right?
Sure.
So what is the input? Input is how many calls this guy has done in a day, right? If he has done 50 calls, 100 calls, and are we actually able to measure what is his number of dialed calls, right? So we, in our app, we actually, every sales guy of ours actually dials from the app, right? So that's the input metrics. Then what is the talk time that this guy has with the customer, right? How many site visits he has planned, right? How many site visits have happened, and out of these site visits, how many have a good feedback, right? So these are the kind of input metrics we actually measure day in and day out. If you look at our internal dashboard, every day on WhatsApp, in each of our city groups, these dashboards come, right? And we just measure the inputs. If we feel that if you actually can control the inputs, the output will happen, right? We just release an output report every month end. Before that, no one looks at the output, just looks at the inputs. Calls, meetings, site visits, feedback, right? So these are our input. These are the feeding blocks to the machinery, right? So I would say that for any organization, be it any sales or product organization, measuring the inputs is very important.
Very interesting. And my sense is what you're essentially also highlighting is that it's important to break down your interactions with the consumer, or whatever your target segment is, break it down in the input variables, and then see how the input works, or and you continue to sort of improve that process so that the output is eventually better is essentially what you're trying to highlight.
Exactly.
Vivek, what are some of the observations that have surprised you, right, through the course of building, these 21, 22 products that you've built, right? What are some of the things that have surprised you, right, on the consumer side? Something that you possibly entered in with a certain anticipation, saying that, my expectation is this is how it's going to play out, right? And then all of a sudden, the way consumers sort of adopted to it and and kind of utilized it, used it, behaved, was a surprise to you. And that could be internal as well, because there is a huge team that you have, right? Of 4,000 people on the street, right? How has that been, right? What are some of those things that have surprised you in the process?
Yeah, so I'll take a specific example. So
Sure.
we were doing primary transactions like till 2 years back, right?
Right.
We never entered into secondary,
Mm-hmm.
and we were always frightful of the fact that, I mean, why would actually people come onto our portal for secondary? There is 99 acres out there, there is Magic Bricks out there, right?
Right.
And these are well-established portals running for 20 years and so on, right?
Right.
So we started building our secondary side, which is
Mm-hmm.
more like resale, rentals, right? Almost 2 years back, and then last year we launched it with a few listings.
Okay.
Uh, so and we, as I said, we focused on distribution. So we
Right.
focused on agents, right? We didn't go B2C at first go. We said
Mm-hmm.
that let give most of these sites, they charge a package to the agents for doing the listings, right?
Right.
So we made the listings free,
Okay.
and we also made the leads that these agents gets also free. Okay, so
Okay.
we focused on distribution and we got a lot of listings. So
Right.
right now, so our portal gets around 500,000 listings. Okay,
Okay.
which is equivalent to these other bigger portals. Okay,
Is that per month, per annum?
so that's the total number of listings per month.
Okay.
We get close to 200,000 listings. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
so 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 we built supply side of it, right?
Right.
And then we waited for the customers, and we were thinking that why would people come? But as our supply grew,
Right.
we solved one part of the chicken and egg problem, and consumers started flocking.
Right.
So our traffic actually grew from 500K per month 2 years back to around 4 million, almost 8 times,
Wow.
right? And because we solved that particular problem of having large comprehensive set of listings by
Right.
agents, right? We were able to bring the demand,
Right.
and that actually shook us that we could generate that kind of demand in the market.
Right.
So as I said, that sometime you are afraid of going one step, right? Because you feel that this is not right, and then I need to perfect it, right?
Right.
So we didn't have the perfect product at one place. Probably many of those listings were fake. Also, we worked on the listing
Right.
quality. We worked on the images. We worked on a lot of things.
Right.
And now our traction is almost. We are growing in our traffic. We are growing almost like 10% month on month.
Okay.
And sooner or later, we are going to be the number one portal for real estate.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Vivek, this was not a question that I'd planned to ask, right? But given of what you're telling me, right, it just sort of makes me, ask you this particular question, right? Real estate is a very, very immersive process, right? Consumer wants to sort of be out there, experience, know. There is a lot of informational stuff, and that's largely because one person is possibly going to buy a house once in a lifetime, right? There's a lot of technology development which is happening, right? So there is a lot of AR, VR, a lot of that is being brought in, right? What is some of that which you are implementing currently in future, and what are some of those technologies that you're excited about, right, as a whole? And my last point is, when somebody is building, a product, right? How important is it to have those elements or new technologies factored in, depending on the consumer's journey? How do you prioritize that?
Yeah. So personally, I'm very excited about digital real estate. Okay. So
Okay.
real estate is probably the last industry which has come onto a digital platform, right?
Right.
Especially during the last 2 years,
Right.
during this COVID time. Real estate is typically a very traditional, very laid back industry in terms of adoption of technology.
Right.
But what we saw in the last 2 years, especially after COVID, right, a lot of these guys, a lot of the real estate developer, they wanted to move online,
Right.
because physical site visits were not happening, right? So we built a product around this where
Right.
how you can actually enable a digital sales completely online, right? So your search and discovery was anyways online.
Right.
Then how do you actually enable virtual site visits? So we built a product around it where we can actually visualize the entire housing society in a,
Right.
in a 3D and VR format.
Oh, wonderful.
We started working on that since the beginning of COVID period. We had some success. Then we found a few good entrepreneurs who were toying with this idea. We acquired a company called as PropVR.
Okay.
Now we have a full stack product which can actually showcase you the entire inventory, right? In a 3D format. You can actually go inside the house. You can check how this house looks from a balcony. What is a top view? What are the amenities?
Right.
What is a 5 kilometer surrounding areas around this house, right? So we bought all of that online, and now we see that people are actually liking this product. A lot of developer queries. We are giving this on a SaaS platform to various real estate developers, right? So we brought this part of journey online, and the third part is like, how do you actually enable transaction? Can you do a e-signature on the contract? Can you generate a builder buyer agreement? Can you get a mortgage disbursed, right? So we were always working on that part, but still I think due to regulations, there are some documents on which it is mandated to have a wet signature, a physical process of registry where the guy has to be present before the registrar, right? So all of those will eventually come online, but I think we will be the first company who would reach there. Right. So we are investing in a lot of these technology, 3D, AR, VR. Then the second space that I am most excited about is the data space. Right. So if you look at real estate as an industry, right, you are probably buying the most expensive thing that you have already that you have ever bought, right? You are putting your lifetime savings into it.
Correct.
But what is the intelligence that you get around this, right? If you buy a 10,000 rupees mobile phone, right, or if you buy any mutual fund or any stock, you will get a lot of reports, lot of data, how the stock has performed, what are the features of this smartphone, how it compares with other, right? So lot of things that you would find, but do you find it for real estate? No, right? And the reason is because the information is opaque. It is lying somewhere in government databases, government registries, right? How that master plan is going to look like in 10 years, what are the new developments coming over here, is there a nala around this, is there a village, how have the property being transacted over a period of time, right? So what we have been doing, and we acquired our second company in this space, which is called as Prop CMC, right? Which is into this digitizing this entire data and intelligence around real estate. Okay. So through GIS mapping, we are actually mapping each and every lat long of this major cities, right? We are building layers on top of it, and then we are actually sourcing a lot of data from these government databases. And we will bring a very we will actually, we have launched something already on our website where you can actually check the property prices over a period of time for a particular building, and these are actual pricing, these are not projections, right? So this is what, like, if you're living, let's say, in DLF ABC, so what are the 10 recent transactions in DLF ABC tower, and have happened at what price, right? So we have brought this for Mumbai already onto our company. Okay. And we are working on a lot of cities, and there are a lot of data churning that is going on, because some of these government documents are in regional languages, Kannada, Hindi, and Marathi and all. So a lot of transformation that we have to do on this data. But I am very excited about this data space. So I think we would be the first company which will build this data product very comprehensive data product for Indian real estate.
Interesting. There is a lot of work which is happening on creating brokerless models, right? And more so when it comes to renting, right? Where people are bringing in elements of IoT and then they're sort of plugging it in the way things are, right? There's a lot of that which is happening. There's a complete product play which is getting built, right? What are your thoughts about some of that stuff, the upcoming stuff? What are your thoughts about some of that?
See, we
The
as a
newer trends,
company, we have always focused on the agent. We see
right?
that agent is a conduit which is necessary for such a large transaction. Okay?
Right.
Maybe in rentals also some part of the agent can be eliminated.
Right.
But for a sales process where you need someone to actually do all the documentation, vet the documents, right? And most importantly, bring buyer and seller to a common price, right?
Right.
Which is very difficult to do, right? So that's the role of the agent. And we always believe that we have always focused on building a agent tech, right?
Right.
How do we actually enable this agent to do more business?
Interesting.
So there are some companies who are focused on eliminating the agent, but we are on the opposite side, right? Um, so we have a platform called as Square Connect, where I said that there are like 150,000 brokers onto our platform.
Right.
We give them free listings, free leads, and
Mm-hmm.
they report back transactions to us. We don't ask them to report back, but they report back and they share revenues with us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's the kind of trust that we are building in this ecosystem.
Right.
Of course, with some of these, see, all of these things which you said, IoT or maybe any of these online rental agreements, all these stuff should help.
Right.
But we are more focused on how we can actually help these agents do more business and do this business more efficiently rather than eliminating them. So we are kind of helping them to grow more, and also if they grow, we also grow with them.
Right. I think my last question, Vivek, for this session, and you've answered in a certain way, right? I'll still ask you this question. What are your suggestions, for founders who are building for scale and are working for a complex market, right? I know you said that get out there in the market. That's an important piece, right? But maybe
Okay.
same one or two more points would be very helpful.
Yeah. So first is get out in the market, experiment, right? Don't focus on solving all problems, right? Focus on a specific
Prioritize.
problem which you can solve well.
Right.
And then also let the market teach you what needs to be built, right? So maybe if you want to build something, first start doing that thing offline, right?
Right.
Let's say if you want to build something for broker, start doing broking offline, right? Understand what a broker goes through. If you are
Sure.
building something for consumer, let's say you want to build a registration process for properties for anything, right? So do a few of those things offline, right?
Right.
Go into the market, see what are the pain points, right? And then start backward from there and start solving some of those, right? Just don't go and build the product first and take it to the market.
Right.
First go to the market and then build the product. So that would be my primary advice to the
Interesting.
founders.
Vivek, this was a session which we essentially carved out, focused on scale, creating scalable tech, right? But the fact that we've touched upon so many things, right? We've touched upon tech, we've touched upon leadership and team management, we've touched upon the feedback process, and and a lot of strategic stuff, right? It's as always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. And look forward to having you over with us. Thank you for taking us through the complexities of building for a large team, and importance of integrated systems. It's usually very difficult to imagine at at a very larger level, right? A lot of organizations falter, when it comes to creating integrated systems. Importance of data. And yeah, I think revolutionizing the real estate space, which is has been a very individual heavy, a conversational heavy play, through solving it through technology. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Ashu. Yeah, it was very nice interacting with you, and look forward to meeting you in person very soon.
Hopefully soon, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vivek. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashu.